Welcome to episode 3 of Powerhouse, where we bring to you the powerhouses of the mitochondrial world. I'm joined, as always, or at least the second time, so sometimes, with my co-host, Dr. Phil Yeske. Phil, how are you doing today?
Well, thank you, Brian. Pleasure to be here.
Now, it must be a little bit warmer where you are. In the Midwest, it's the end of April, and I'm wearing a sweater. I had snow this morning, yesterday morning I had snow. And then I had bright sun. I'm looking forward to more sunny days, that's for sure.
It is definitely moving in the right direction after what looked to be a return to winter there for a few days.
Exactly. Well, it's, the signs of spring are certainly here right now. And at UMDF, really busy time for us. The spring is always an exciting time for us. And I know one in particular is coming up here real soon. You're chairing a session at this Targeting Mitochondria conference. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I'm really excited by that opportunity. So this is a conference that's really industry focused in that it's a lineup of speakers over 2 days, all around therapeutic development that targets mitochondria. Now, obviously, the piece we're interested in are the rare inherited disorders. That's what UMDF represents. But I think, as most of our listeners appreciate at this point, we know that mitochondrial dysfunction is also very important to many other disease communities, like metabolic diseases, diabetes, degenerative diseases like Parkinson's, ALS, Alzheimer, and ultimately the disease that gets us all aging. So this is really a 2-day conference where there are speakers on all aspects of mitochondrial research with respect to therapeutic development. And it should be a lot of fun to be involved in chairing the day one.
Well, we're excited that you're representing UMDF and our patient families, and excited to tune into that. Certainly the entire UMDF team is keeping busy this spring. Of course, we're heading into our spring EFL season. Shout out to our friends already in Houston and Dallas who have had a really successful event right out of the gate. What's interesting this year, on the heels of everything happening in the pandemic, we're encouraging everybody to walk their own way, right? So you might do a traditional walk, you might do a run. I got myself a pandemic puppy this year who requires a lot of walks. So my walk this way will be with my puppy. Do you have any plans yourself, Phil, for walking your way this year?
Well, I'll be out with the kids, like always, like getting the family involved. And, last year we were out, we did a little run, right, as part of it, and did a live broadcast. And it's just fun to change it up year to year. And we know we can't get together in large groups the way we really want to for that socializing, that peer-to-peer contact, but it's really nice to still see the community coming together in their own way, right, to support what UMDF is doing in our mission.
It sure is. And one of the ways that we have pivoted with Energy for Life that's here to stay, the development team at UMDF launched a national Energy for Life walk too. So if you happen to be in a market where there was not an Energy for Life walk, you can now do the national walk. And certainly a shout out to our good friends at Zogenix, who are a national walk partner for us. And of course, everybody can learn more about this at energyforlife.org to see if you've got a walk in your market. And if you don't, to check out that national walk as well too. Also on the fundraising front, we are in the closing weeks of our Accelerators Big Pitch event. So if you're new to UMDF or don't know about this event, this is a special event that bridges philanthropy and science together. Phil, you've been working very closely with the selection process. This is a program for postdoctoral fellows to compete for competitive UMDF grants. And tell me what you're allowed to tell us so far. What can you share with us?
I can't give away too much, but the foundation of the program, of course, is first and foremost, we want to select candidates that are scientifically fundable projects. So all submissions go through our peer review process together with our scientific and medical advisory board. And from that peer review, we try to select 3 finalists that are considered all fundable projects from a scientific point of view. So now the opportunity, of course, is for those 3 finalists to create their pitch, present to our donors, the accelerators, and we really find out who connects best with the donor base. And so that'll come at the end of June. We're real close to finalizing the top 3. Not quite there yet, but I expect to have those names over to you within a day or two.
Perfect. Well, there's still time to become an accelerator donor as well, too. So these are donors who give to UMDF on an annual basis a total of $500 or more. It unlocks that special benefit to vote for the final big pitch winner. And you can learn more about that at umdf.org as well, too. Certainly the big signature event that happens for us in June, where, boy, the good amount of work it happens right now in planning and putting the finishing touches on a really nice program, is our world-class mitochondrial medicine event, which again will be virtual this year. And here's a special message from this year's junior host.
Hey guys, it's Mita Warrior B'nai Wilkerson from Clovis, California. I'm so excited to be your junior host for Mitochondrial Medicine 2021, which will be virtual again this year. We are planning great sessions of patient-family meetings that will start on June 24th. And the best part is you can attend safely and completely from your own home. Log on often for programming and registration updates at umdf.org/symposium. See you in June.
Now, if our junior host, B'nai, doesn't sell Symposium, I don't know what does, Phil.
Oh, she puts a smile on your face. I mean, just, the energy there, really great. We're looking forward to her involvement.
Well, I know you spent a good amount of your time in preparation around the scientific program.
Yeah.
And I was just checking out the agenda the other day about some of the exciting things happening on the scientific front, and maybe you can share a little bit about some of the activity we anticipate.
Yeah, we're changing things up this year as if we didn't have enough to do. Last year, virtually just planning around a June event. We tried to talk to our stakeholders, get feedback from the patients, the researchers, the clinicians, industry, everybody that's involved with it. And, one thought was maybe we could take the scientific program that normally would be compressed over a 3-day period right at the end of June when we meet in person, and spread it out over May and June. I think everybody is tired of these Zoom meetings that go on for 8 hours, and it's just not a really effective way to consume a lot of content. So what we're doing instead is over 4 Fridays in May and June, we're going to have 3 speakers and a few poster presentations on each of those Fridays over 2.5 hours. All of it will be recorded, so all of the registrants of the symposium can consume on demand if they prefer. But live is the opportunity to have some Q&A, to have some discussion. So we're really excited to test this right as a new way. So that'll be again Fridays in May and June, and then when we get to the end of June, what would have traditionally been our in-person meeting, we'll have the clinician-focused meetings for the MMS. We'll also have some fireside chat because this is a special year. I know you're going to talk about that in a bit, Brian, so I'll let you kind of address that with some of the people that have been involved with mitochondrial disease research and clinical care for quite a long time. So I'm really looking forward to that. And then Friday, which historically has been the day we try to focus on clinical trial activity, because we know that's the day that patients, families, researchers, clinicians, industry, everybody, all eyes are on the program that day. We get clinical trial updates, but just to change it up a little bit, rather than a series of presentations over multiple hours, we thought we'd just facilitate a few small group panel discussions. So we'll break the clinical trial sponsors up into small groups and give them a chance to provide highlights to the audience that day. But then if our registrants want further details and hear a more extended version of those presentations, they can go to our virtual poster hall where we'll host longer talks for them. And then the last part, and I'm really excited about this, and again, this was based on feedback that we got from participants in the meeting last year. Can you try to recreate in some way what networking would look like if we were in person? That's really hard to do virtually, but we're going to give it a shot. We're going to have a happy hour networking session at the end of our programming on Friday, where as many sponsors that are interested will create their own breakout rooms. And then that will be the opportunity for patients, families, for everyone to move between these rooms, have a little more of a discussion with these sponsors about their clinical trials, what they're planning, what are they interested in? What is the voice of the patient, right? The patient perspective. So it's an opportunity to kind of move around in and out, talk to various sponsors active in the area. And hopefully we find value in it. Again, we wanted to try it, and I'm looking forward to giving it a shot there on June 25th.
Yeah, another great program being built, and certainly a shout out to our scientific co-chairs, Dr. Bruce Cohen, Dr. Bill Copeland, and the whole team of the scientific planning committee that helps bring this together from a research and clinical perspective. And of course, as Phil was mentioning, just robust family programming once again, to have that over the course of that weekend. But also the enduring content that you'll find on MitoU for the months ahead as well too. So very exciting time coming up with MitoMed. As Phil mentioned as well, it's always our chance to both recognize and honor, to educate, to learn, but also to celebrate. And this year's a really important celebration as UMDF celebrates its 25th anniversary. So we're going to have some special engagements happening on Thursday night of that event, on the 24th. Bringing together our past Vanguard Award winners, some special guests, some important messages from the real hallmarks of research and education and clinical care. And I'm really excited to bring that group together to share in this celebration.
Yeah, me too. It's a great opportunity. Oftentimes I refer to them as the Mount Rushmore, right?
Yes.
Mitochondrial disease. Although I think we might need a couple extra faces
exactly
on the mountainside. But folks might think I've been involved, kind of looking at the hair, like I've been involved for 25 years. I haven't, only about 15 years. And so I think it'll be really interesting just to draw out more about those early days, right? When there wasn't an established patient community, patient advocacy. Right. It was really a handful of advocates in their own way, and that the role UMDF played in trying to bring them together and really create a much more robust community. It should be a lot of fun.
Right. We have been rooted as a grassroots bootstrapping organization. And what's so exciting as an organization like ours, where so many of the folks we get to work with can tell us about the growth of the organization and have so much rich history to share with us. And no matter how much we grow or how big we can get in supporting the community, we want to stay true to so many of those roots as well too. And I think about our mission and the work we do from a government relations and advocacy standpoint, where it has always been driven by the voice of our patient community. Yeah. And it's something that will always be a priority for UMDF as you think about the pillars of our organization being focused on research, education, support, and advocacy. And I feel like sometimes advocacy is the unsung hero of our mission here. There's so much great activity that happens every single day for our community in terms of taking our voice to Capitol Hill and to state legislatures around the country as well too. And that brings us to today's powerhouse guest, Mr. Rob Bradner. Rob is an attorney with UMDF's advocacy partner in Washington, D.C., Holland and Knight. He joined the firm in 2000, following 13 years in government service. And he had a congressional career before that, including 7 years as chief of staff and counsel to Representative John Edward Porter. With more than 30 years of background working in the legislative and regulatory arena, Rob provides counseling, strategy development, and advocacy services on a range of complex and difficult federal matters. And Rob has a real expertise in healthcare policy and funding. It's part of the reason why UMDF has chosen to go with Holland and Knight. We've been together since 2009, and we wanted to bring Rob in today to share a little bit about this important initiative, important part of what we do at UMDF. The springtime, while we have our special events, we've got our MitoMed as well too. It's a busy time in the government arena as well too. So Rob, we're delighted to have you in the Powerhouse today. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, Brian, thanks. Hey, Phil, good to see you.
Well, hey, Rob, I've got a sweet spot for government relations and advocacy. A little bit of fast fact on the CEO here. My degree is in political communications. I cut my teeth at the American Cancer Society doing grassroots advocacy. And, I had dreams of storming Capitol Hill as a college student for all my causes. And I enjoyed the work. But what I did learn was this type of career isn't for everyone. Like, I love my job now. I get to do a little bit of it. And I get to work with really smart people like you, Rob, who help move this forward. But it takes a special construct to do this day in and day out. And boy, I'd love for you to share with our community a little bit of what led you down this path of advocacy work.
Sure. I graduated from college and I didn't have a job.
Good starting point.
Yes.
That's where I started. But I did have an aunt who lived in the Virginia suburbs, and that seemed a little better option than declaring defeat and moving home. And I got a job with a consulting firm here in DC and spent about 9 months with them. But what I really wanted to do was work on Capitol Hill, and my chance came when opening popped open with my hometown congressman, who was on the appropriations committee, and I thought, well, gee, that sounds like kind of a stupid committee. All they do is write the checks.
Little did you know then, right?
Little
might feel a little different now about that committee.
Little did I know then that the Appropriations Committee is one of the power committees. The other is the Ways and Means Committee that raises your taxes or lowers them, and the Energy and Commerce Committee that regulates everything under the sun. But the appropriators are the spenders, and I stayed with Congressman Porter for 13 years. And in the space of that time, he went from being a relatively junior member of the minority party to becoming the chairman of the Appropriations Committee. Has 12 subcommittees that fund different parts of the government. And he took over as chairman of the Labor, Health and Human Services and Education Subcommittee, which funds those three agencies in a very large social spending bill. It's a very broad, sweeping piece of legislation that they have to pass every year to fund those various agencies of the government. Working on the Hill is hard. We used to say that, the pay is low, but the hours are long.
That combination.
It is extremely rewarding work because you can really dig in and make a difference on a lot of issues. I mean, I know people are used to seeing the just constant fighting back and forth on cable news and whatnot, but at the more granular level, where there isn't so much anxiety and focus, there are a lot of things where you can really help people on a range of things and move the ball on a range of issues. And one of the things I always enjoyed was doing the congressman's work within HHS, funding the National Institutes of Health. The National Institutes of Health is a major agency within HHS. They've grown now to about, they're well north of $40 billion. And they consist of a series of institutes that are focused in different areas. So you have the Diabetes and Kidney Institute, you have the Neurological Disease Institute, so on and so forth. And their major goal is to have competitive research funded, a lot of which is done by universities on a broad range of subject matters. And I was very pleased when I worked with him to be part of an effort that was successful to double the NIH's budget over a 5-year period, which got broad support from a lot of stakeholders. But since that time, when he retired, I moved over to Holland and Knight. Holland and Knight is a large law firm with a government relations group sort of nested within it, if you will. And I think we're one of the more well-recognized advocacy groups in town, and pretty successful. I focus my work on healthcare and research, and a good amount of that is still the appropriations process I was describing. But it's very rewarding work because you can still do the same thing you did on the Hill. You can help people. and help navigate the. There's nothing about the congressional process that's simple. It's very business.
Right.
And so there's a lot of sort of unwritten rules and practices and other things that are tricky to navigate if you haven't had some experience with them.
Well, we're glad you're there now, Robbie. You certainly, for an organization like UMDF to be able to tap into, one of the top federal policy practices in the United States, to have staff in Washington, D.C. I'd love for you to talk to us a little bit about what that resource means to a patient advocacy group like ours, to our patient community, the expertise, the team, a little bit about your approach, and maybe a little bit of, patient advocacy groups and working with the government 101. I know that we probably don't have enough time to cover all of that, but a few points on that I think would be really helpful.
Well, I would start here. The key asset is the families and the patients. There is nothing I can do. I can help focus that energy. I can help organize it and direct it. But what is immensely important is the participation of the UMDF family in all of these efforts. Members of Congress respond to their constituency. That's what they do. And that's how they stay in office. They sometimes have to take courageous votes that people don't like, but in the main, they want to listen to their constituents and be responsive to their constituents. And so a fair amount of what we do is figuring out, okay, let's go here, let's do this, let's move the ball here. And certainly we have lots of conversations with people about that. But what really can seal the deal is when the families reach out. And so I think what we've been able to do working with UMDF over several years was to build what I would call the infrastructure that helps us to get things done. We did a number of things. We started holding the symposium every other year somewhere in the DC area, and then organizing a day on the Hill and flooding the Hill with 100 UMDF family members, sweeping broadly, getting 75, 100 meetings, so people could hear firsthand from their constituents what this is all about and the challenges that they face. We created what's known as a caucus in the House of Representatives. These are members of Congress who simply voluntarily come together to join a caucus to support an issue. And the mitochondrial caucus is chaired by Congressman McGovern, a Democrat from Massachusetts, and Congressman Fitzpatrick, a Republican from Pennsylvania. He has about, I think we're probably around 35 members.
Yeah.
And we're always pushing our UMDF families to tell their members to join the caucus. But that becomes a vehicle to get things done. Mm-hmm. So the caucus has hosted briefings up on Capitol Hill, where we've been able to bring in members of UMDF's Scientific and Medical Advisory Board and others to talk about critical issues in mitochondrial disease. We've been able to talk about the challenges families face getting reimbursement for nutritional therapies, that sort of thing, wide range of issues. And those have been very successful in galvanizing. And then we also use our caucus to drive in the House our process of requesting things out of the Appropriations Committee. So our leaders organize a letter every year to the committee saying, here's what we would like out of the funding process. And that's been very successful. And the other piece of our infrastructure, if you will, is the Scientific and Medical Advisory Board. We have had great buy-in by our research experts in terms of participating in caucus events, in terms of coming with us up to Capitol Hill. It's one thing for these offices to hear from a history major like me. It's another for them. It's another for them to hear from the real subject matter experts. And there's a lot of respect. There's a lot of respect on the Hill for scientific expertise. So everybody who works up there they're young, They're smart and they're hardworking, and they get it, and they appreciate when you get them the information they need to help them help you.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point, actually, Rob. I've had the pleasure of being involved in some of these caucus meetings and a number of the days on the Hill. And, as you well know, it's not just the legislators, right, that get things done by any means. It's the whole team behind them. And even at our caucus meetings, when the staff members are there, if not the legislators, it's all about relationship building. And you never know where that connection is going to be made, right? Where someone really feels a connection to mitochondrial disease or the impact of the disease on our families, and then goes back and reports back to their supervisor, to their boss, that there's really something important going on here. I've seen that happen time and time again, where it's relationship building. You're never sure where the connection is going to be made, but when they're made, that's when the payoff really comes for those efforts.
Yeah, very true. Very true.
Rob, I want to go back to your memory of being an inspiring government relations professional and your thoughts around the appropriations process. Now, as a seasoned government relations professional, I know when we spend time together, a good amount of our agenda is focused on appropriations. And hopefully you could help us kind of understand how that works. And what I'm really interested in as well, too, is it's, you think about the pot of research dollars, and there's so many diseases, organizations, causes that are out there. When we're down at our own day on the Hill, you're going to run into 17 other day on the Hills that are happening down there as well, too. So I'd love to have you talk about the competitive nature of this as well, too. And, some of the success we've had in getting mitochondrial disease recognized at a national level.
Sure. There's a lot to unpack there, but the federal budget process is an annual process, and it starts in February. In a normal year, in February, the president sends a budget request. Now, as you know from the Constitution, he doesn't have the power of the purse. Congress does, and Congress looks at his budget, and then they create their own budget resolution, and then that helps to guide. It basically serves to provide an overall limitation on the amount of money Congress can spend in any given year. And then there's also a taxation or changes to entitlement program piece of it. But so the Appropriations Committee then gets their pot of money, which is divided into the security portfolio and the non-security. So security is defense and homeland security and some, State Department things. And then the rest is non-security, and they divide it up. They divide the pot of money up among the subcommittees I described, and then the subcommittee gets to work. They hold hearings on the budget request, and then they assemble a spending bill, and that spending bill is accompanied by a lot of direction in a report. The report isn't technically law, but a government agency is highly likely to follow the direction of the people who fund them. And if they don't, they'll be back. As I said, this is an annual process. They'll be back next year.
Right.
And there will be some significant discussion of why they didn't do what they were asked to do. Mm-hmm. And maybe they have a good reason. But anyway, they try to be accommodative of the direction they're being given. And so then that bill goes through the House, goes through the Senate, and eventually gets signed into law. There's often a lot of hiccups along the way, and sometimes you have these government shutdowns and so on and so forth. But it does get done one way or the other. So we have been able to work in that process pretty effectively in a couple of ways. And one is with the National Institutes of Health. We started very early on, really before we even pushed too hard on the appropriations side. We went out to talk with NIH because mitochondrial disease and mitochondrial function and dysfunction is fascinating. You have a whole series, obviously, of rare diseases that are largely mapped to various mutations in the mitochondrial or otherwise DNA. You have a fascinating connection, as Dr. Collins, the head of the NIH, has testified, that mitochondrial function and dysfunction is very central to the etiology of a whole number of diseases. You see it in Parkinson's, you see it in cancer, you see it in gastrointestinal and diabetes, you see it with Huntington's. And it doesn't mean that it's the cause of any of these things, but it's very much implicated in them. We've had Parkinson's researchers come up with the caucus who believe that ultimately mitochondrial dysfunction is going to be the key to Parkinson's disease. And that's just an example. So there's this sort of interesting collection of things going on there. But that also means that mitochondrial research expertise is divided among the various different national institutes. So you may have some expertise in the Diabetes Institute, looking at it from that point of view. There's a lot of work in the Neurological Institute, because some of the worst mitochondrial complications are when you are things that attack the neurological system. Similarly, since a lot of these diseases are unfortunately ravaging young children, the National Institute of Child Health and Human Development. But the very first mitochondrial research done at NIH was the National Institute of Aging, because Phil just said a few minutes ago, your mitochondria slow down over time, and it's fundamental.
And none of us can escape that.
Yeah. Take care of your mitochondria.
Right.
Eat well and exercise.
Right.
And one that might come to a surprise to the folks tuning in is some of the success we've had with unlocking dollars through the Department of Defense. And I know when I first came here, that was one that I had to get some further understanding on, and it might be good to comment on that, Rob.
Sure. Well, we've been successful with the NIH, and we've been successful also with the Department of Defense. The Department of Defense for many years has had something called the Congressionally Directed Medical Research Program. And I love the military because they just call it what it is.
It's refreshing.
It's a medical research program that Congress told them to stand up many years ago, and it's grown since then. And they look at various medical research issues, and the DoD is now the second largest funder of biomedical research behind NIH. And they look at issues that have relevance to the warfighter and military families. And Congress suggests areas for them to include in their research portfolio. They are very proud of the fact that they do not duplicate what the NIH does. They figure out where the NIH has got gaps, and they try to fill those gaps. I think they take a lot of pride in risk-taking. They're not afraid to fund an innovative idea that maybe it won't work. This is science, and you gotta swing at the ball sometimes, even if you're gonna miss it. And they also do a great job of consulting the families and getting an understanding of what the families care about. So we were successful a few years back in getting mitochondrial disease included in the defense budget, and then the folks who run the program had us in for a visit. They talked to our scientific and medical advisory board. They talked to our families. They scoped out the work. One of the reasons that Congress was amenable to this was mitochondrial function does have a very direct relationship to the warfighter. There's a great interest in battlefield injury. Can I stimulate your mitochondrial function to enhance your energy level while I'm trying to get you, to medical care? There's a clear connection between traumatic brain injury and mitochondrial function. And the leading thesis right now is that Gulf War syndrome is actually a mitochondrial issue. How is it that you have two warfighters who were exposed to the same burning oil well, and one of them has long-term debilitating symptoms and the other is fine? Well, the belief is that it's a difference in the mitochondrial characterization, and that environmental insult triggers a mitochondrial reaction in one person when not in the other. The other thing that's interesting about this from the military point of view is that your mitochondria function differently depending on where you are. If you're at the equator, your mito is going to be at a lower, shall you say, operating tempo than if you're up in the Himalayas. And so with the military, obviously needing to move people around to different environments and have them be at their peak level, there's an interest in that issue as well. The Chinese Army was studying that issue a number of years ago. And yeah, that's exactly what people on the Hill say when we tell them that.
Well, we talked to a NASA contractor last month about the difference in the effects in outer space as well too. So we're truly all over the globe in the universe. So it talks about the effects of mitochondria.
Mitochondria for you. But we really can't overstate the importance of being included in this DoD program to our research community. Just by being listed, that opened up pots of money of hundreds of millions of dollars that didn't exist within the NIH. And our researchers have really taken advantage of this. We know that since 2015, that's unlocked about $30 million worth of additional research funds towards mitochondrial disease because of that DoD program. That's really significant in a rare disease community. So kudos to you, your team, and everyone that was involved in advocating. I mean, this was an advocacy effort for a number of years to finally get to that point where mitochondrial disease was listed with the DoD in the CDMRP program. Big win.
And Rob mentioned it, a real shout out to the patient families who served as reviewers in this process as well too. It's a real come together between our friends in DC, the UMDF, and as Rob mentioned before, the legion of support through our patient families who played a very critical role in this.
And our patient families have been super helpful with the NIH as well. Brian, you asked sort of about the competitive nature.
Yeah.
And, Parkinson's is a horrible disease. My mother fell to it, so I understand that, but it's a broad disease. It affects a lot of people. So is Alzheimer's, so is Parkinson's. Mm-hmm. So you have large constituencies of people who care about these things. And all of them are important and all of them need to be addressed. When you deal with primary mitochondrial disease funding, you're talking about rare diseases and you have a lot fewer people. And what it really means from a advocacy point of view is that you have to punch above your weight.
Right.
And you have to UMDF has to be nimble and effective, and the families have to be participating in the advocacy effort because that's your force multiplier.
Right.
And I think people on the Hill understand that you don't just give all the money to the diseases that affect the most people, that you have to look more broadly. And the NIH will tell you, it's not all about funding this disease and that disease. A lot of it's about doing the basic research to figure out functionalities and other things that then lead to innovation.
And I have to think too, Rob, there has to be some engagement strategy with those other diseases as well too, whether Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, TBI, places where we can come together to raise all ships a little bit. I know that's something that we talk about quite a bit in terms of connecting the mitochondrial function with mitochondrial disease. Yeah,
no, very true. And we have had those conversations with other groups. Duchenne's muscular dystrophy is an example. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of belief that mito really is at the heart of that issue. And so there's shared interests among different stakeholders, and that's an example of one.
What else do you think our community can do to help put mitochondrial disease into the national conversation, right? Like what are some of the things from whether they be patients, parents, caregivers, researchers? Just curious of your thoughts around that.
I think we have to keep driving the message. I think we have to keep working you have very effective chapters around the country working locally. We just have to build more of that infrastructure.
Government affairs is always a long game, isn't it, Rob? Yeah,
and it changes every 2 or 4 years as well, too, depending on where you sit. And one such instance, of course, is the transition of our president. And certainly, it's an effort we take every time a new president comes on board to inform him or her in the future of mitochondrial disease and what's important to our patient families. And maybe you can comment a little bit on that process as too, Rob.
Right, we do have to re-educate from time to time as administrations change on some of these things. Some of the granular stuff. The North American Mitochondrial Disease Consortium is an example of something that NIH funds. We have to make sure that as administrations change, that it doesn't get lost, that when it's up for a 5-year renewal, people know what it is and why it matters. And that part of that's through the appropriations process. But yes, you do have different priorities with different administrations. So, on that subject, the last administration wasn't particularly interested in NIH research. I would say on Capitol Hill, there's lots of interest. It is a bipartisan issue. There is bipartisan support for research funding on the Hill. And what you're seeing right now is a couple of things. One is an extensive focus on China, all things China. So we've had obviously the trade disputes, the feeling that they're dumping steel, the intellectual property confiscation, obviously Hong Kong and the Uyghurs are fundamental problems. But there's been a big focus on Chinese involvement in research. And are they, in effect, sort of exporting, getting boots on the ground over here and then exporting back? There's a big focus on that. But the biggest focus is on competitiveness and the feeling that we have let too much air out of the research balloon at the time when what everybody now acknowledges is our main international competitor, if you will, has been pouring money into research. And so that's leading to a very broad-based effort to put more money into research. There's something called the Endless Frontiers Act, which is moving through Congress now. Now, this is National Science Foundation, energy. I'm not talking biomedical. But what the Biden administration has proposed for the NIH is a $9 billion increase this year.
Wow,
that's a big increase.
Yeah.
And as you may have noticed, the Biden administration is not shy about spending money. But they want to take 6 of that $9 billion to create something called ARPA-H, the Advanced Research Project Agency for Health. And the original agency was DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Project Agencies. And it's all these incredibly brilliant people that are looking out 40 years into the future in terms of what might be, what are the challenges we're going to be facing then? And it tries to be very forward-looking. They've created since then an ARPA-E at the Energy Department to try to look around the corners around energy work. And the idea here is to deal with, to a significant extent, to deal with what's known as the Valley of Death. And that's the space between NIH or DOD biomedical research on here. And then over here is a drug, device, or treatment that actually helps people.
Yeah, where the private sector has to take over, right?
Right. But the private sector doesn't take over right away. They want to make sure you've kind of got something that looks like it might work before they come in. And the government doesn't always do as much funding for the sort of applied piece, and that's why they call it the Valley of Death. You get caught in between these two funding sources, and things that could progress don't. So the big focus here with ARPA-H is to try to address that. How do we come in and they've proposed putting it in NIH, and I don't know if it'll stay there. I think some people think it would really be better off being independent of NIH, so that you can bring in, because you got to bring in the industry voice.
Right.
You got to bring in the venture capital voice, the private equity voice.
Yeah.
You got to get a bunch of stakeholders saying, this is what we need to do to deal with the Valley of Death.
It is really very, very different from the NIH culture. Let's put it this way, right? To be listening to industry and VCs and these sorts of things. So yeah, It could be a challenge.
Yep. It's not really, they're trying. I mean, they've been, a number of years ago, people in Congress said, we're putting a lot of money in here. What are we getting out at the other side? Why is it taking so long to get from the lab to the bedside? And that's when they started pushing on translational research.
And cats.
And so I think they've had some success in trying to do a better job around that.
I'm probably stating the obvious, Rob, but it just seems like so many of our frustrations are tied back to just coordination of government entities. I know I'm stating the obvious here, and I know that's it's a tough wheel to turn as well, but it's something that we think a lot about it at UMDF, of how can we get some of these agencies to talk to each other, whether it's the FDA, the CDC, the NIH, all these regulatory bodies, and maybe you can comment a little bit on or affirm for me the real challenge that is for an organization like ours to make that happen.
Yeah, I mean, the government is a large organism,
yes,
and people get into their silos and people get into their turf, but you can't have one person doing everything. It's just not possible. So you have to have specialization. But then you do have a problem of these folks not necessarily knowing what those folks are doing. So, for example, you have NIH research over here, and then you have FDA drug approval over there. And people say, well, really, shouldn't there be more synergy between those two things?
Yeah.
They make a lot of sense. Or you have, with the pandemic, the Centers for Disease Control is very much in the news, and their job is epidemiology and public health. But, getting them to be networked in with the NIH is also a challenge. I mean, those are just examples.
Yeah.
We've had some success because one of the things we got the NIH to do was support a couple of workshops.
Mm-hmm.
And one of those did bring in other stakeholders from other agencies, as well as from private industry, for a multi-day conference, so everybody could hear what everybody else is concerned about. I know that UMDF has been successful working with FDA in terms of getting them to hold these patient listening sessions.
Mm-hmm.
They can understand when they're reviewing a treatment that comes out of this research and this private investment that we've been talking about, that they have more of an appreciation of what it means for the patients. So there's a lot of things like that, but it is a constant process of nudging people to talk to each other.
Well, and I think so much of the pressure is changing for an organization like ours as well, too. Phil, we didn't talk about one of the real busy things happening this spring, too, is just the meteoric rise in clinical trials activity.
Sure.
And how an organization like ours needs to pace to help educate and advocate in front of regulatory bodies as well, too. And it all kind of comes together real nicely, again, between the patient families, our staff at UMDF, and then having Rob and his team down in DC who can pay attention to this for us every single day. We talk a lot about the constant drumbeat. Phil, you said earlier, this is a long game, and we certainly gotta take our punches when we can, and we gotta hit above our weight a little bit, as Rob mentioned as well too. But it's nonstop. And what makes it all tick, as Rob mentioned earlier, is the power of the patient voice, those constituents sharing it with their representatives as well too. That's something that we're always counting on this community to do. And certainly, if we take anything away from today, I hope it's inspiring our community to join us on an advocacy front, to know that this is good work that we do every day, and it's tough work as well too. And Rob, it's clear to me, I hope to our listeners as well too, that you guys are just doing an incredible amount of work down there for us, and we're so grateful for that, the time you put into this and having that real expertise to know that we can step in and help where we need to, but to know that so much is taken care of as well too. That's a proud investment we make and our donors make to this cause.
Well, thanks. It's I think, and we are a team.
Yeah.
It's myself and Ethan and Miranda, and we pull in others as necessary. But we are all we're all honored to work with you guys.
Well, you're certainly one of our powerhouses. The affectionate name for this show is the Powerhouse, because we like to talk to folks who are powerful in this space. And I'm always curious, and I'm kind of taking back to our opening conversation here about your background. I'd love to know from you just the influences in your life. You're a powerhouse in the mitochondrial disease space, but who are the powerhouses in your life? What has influenced your work?
Probably my parents, who were politically active, governmentally active, in local government, which I think is something that was more common back then, and people have gotten away from a little bit. But it's that notion of that you can and should engage with your government, and both for a variety of reasons, but including the fact that it's everybody's duty to do something to move the ball. It's the First Amendment. It's right in there. You can petition your government for redress of grievances, and when we advocate, that's what we're doing. And it's an essential core American thing. But yeah, I do think they influenced me significantly.
Well put. I was going to ask you if you had any closing comments, Rob, but I think you put a nice bow on that. And I'm ready to go kick down a wall right now, Phil, and do some advocacy work. Well, Rob, we're really grateful for your time, grateful for the good work that you and your team are doing. Please keep it up. Know our patient families are counting on you. And as we've shared today, this goes well beyond mitochondrial disease as well, too. When we think about the connections to aging and mitochondrial dysfunction and unlocking research dollars, this is a much bigger halo effect. So we're lucky to have you on our team.
Thank you. As I said, it's an honor.
Thanks so much, Rob.
Yeah, thanks, Rob.
All right, guys, be well.
You too.
Wow, Phil, that's it's another inspiring conversation.
Yeah.
You're grateful for that expertise, right?
Yeah, grateful for the expertise and a reminder of the tentacles, right, that UMDF has that reach far beyond whatever size our staff can be. We're very fortunate to have collaborators like Rob and his team on many other fronts too, and the patients and all the volunteers that give of their time to us. That's what really makes a difference, right, when it comes down to it.
What was inspiring to me with the conversation with Rob, and he started out early with this, was that working in government, we all have our opinions of what that life looks like, and certainly it has come with a reputation. But to hear him talk about the real joy in his work is the ability to do something good, to do something bigger than yourself, and that's the rallying cry for me as I think about supporting legislation that's friendly for mito patient families. It's our chance to do a lot of real good at an exponential level. You look at those Department of Defense numbers, around $30 million. Right. It takes us a long time to raise that kind of money. To be able to unlock those dollars is really important.
That is a significant amount of money that flows into the research community and then gets leveraged, right? So they have success, and now they're in a position to apply for an even larger grant from the NIH. And maybe there's success from there, and a biopharmaceutical company licenses that product and develops a treatment that turns out to help mitochondrial disease patients or anyone. I mean, that's the way the process is supposed to work. And, I'm, again, just reminded from hearing Rob talk about it, how it's all predicated on effective relationship building.
Right.
And that you have to take a lot of shots on goal. You have to talk to a lot of people, and you don't know when it's really going to pay off. But when it does, it's a disproportionate benefit, right, to the effort that was.
That's right. We want to create opportunities, right, again and again. And again, so many opportunities to support our advocacy efforts, to learn more about the good work that's happening on a government relations front. I encourage everybody to check out umdf.org. Of course, check us out on YouTube, where you can find this podcast. We're all over social media. We're on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram. We want to hear from you. We're celebrating our 25th anniversary this year. Drop us a line, connect with us. Once again, special thanks to our friend Rob Bradner and the entire team at Holland Knight. We're so grateful for everything they're doing for our mission. And until next time, everyone, go fast.